everyone. Welcome to the first guest lecture on Business Economics program. My name is Alvin, and I am a faculty member at Universitas Mulya. And today I will be serving as your moderator. So you'll be hearing presentation from two speakers, Professor Carmelo Ferlito and Sukasah Syahdan, on this timely subject. Before we start, I would like to take a few minutes of your time. There will be a Q&A session after both presenters have presented. And in case of emergency, please use the staircase through the hallway outside of this room. Now, without further ado, please welcome and give a round of applause for our first speaker, Sukasah Syahdan. Sukasah is a faculty member at Universitas Prasetiya. And Sukasah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and also to be the first speaker of the day. What I'd like to give you today is a little bit on entrepreneurship, which I thought could be some background to what's going to go further by Professor Carmelo Ferlito. So giving you some highlights about some thoughts about entrepreneurship, something that is very familiar and probably I do hope that I can get some new insights to you about entrepreneurship or kewirausahaan in bahasa Indonesia. And we're going to go beyond economics, a little bit about some social, political, economic theories, a little bit just by passing. So, and it will move on from the United States, and I think you will know why I begin with the United States later on. And the point here is to invite you to embrace entrepreneurship in hopefully in better light. I'd like to begin with the first one. The main takeaways, I'd like to begin with the end. The end is very simple, actually. Right here. I would like to convince you, persuade you into believing that entrepreneurship is actually a very beautiful force in life, in the universe, and it is actually the main driving force in any economy. Despite other things, other factors, I'm a believer that entrepreneurship is actually the key. And it may be the only savior, true savior of our savior, meaning our humanity, for the reason I would like to say why. I will be very brief here, and hopefully I can finish it within 15 to 20 minutes, so I give the floor to Professor Carmelo. Okay? Now here is coming back to the 19th century America, especially and the early part of the 20th century. We call these the peddlers. Peddlers here, they are men, they trade things, they carry within their bags here, they walk from town to towns, places to places, and they sell things. This one is the bread one, this one sells some beer or waters, and these peddlers are independent sellers. Maybe we can see also in Serpong, in BSD, right? People like. Here is the representation in light, the bigger one, the bigger peddler. You see one person selling stuff. They're traveling from one place to another, depending solely on their own entrepreneurial ability. Okay, and according to the ethics of the peddlers, actually, they were the backbone of the American economy. And although they are not really glamorous, if you look back here, this is not exactly glamorous, or not fancy things, but actually they deserve credit for the making of modern America. And then with time, they were very known for their integrity. So this is something that is I would like to especially point out, they take pride in their own initiative and their self-reliance and also independence and integrity. There is nothing like, they rely on public opinion, meaning that the social convention, these were the measure that kept them being straight people, honest people, okay? They never asked favor from anybody. Okay, so they didn't expect the society to take care of him. So very independent. As you see, of course, America was a country that was made from people from England until the Puritan era. They wanted to have better living, and they traveled to the newfound world, America, and they made things there by themselves, their own hands, bare hands. Okay, so nowadays, cutting it short, peddling is probably history, and but their legacy is actually from these people, the peddlers. We have merchants with chains of supermarkets or marts, modern marts that exist in America today. So they were the precursors, the antecedents to all the things that are great that make corporate America. Okay? Right, so these are characteristics, the economic status that they have. The peddlers, they make money. The economy was better than the rest of the people. And in time, the status and brought them a very peculiar part of the middle class society here. Okay, they're meticulous and they have personal integrity, as I was saying, right? And at that time, we're talking about 20th century America, yeah? In the early 1890s until 1910, 1950. I would like you to pay attention to this. This is probably something new to most people. There were two in the middle class of America. There were two other categories. One, the bureaucrats. Second, the managers of big corporations. Not the peddlers, but the owners of big companies. Okay. Now these deserve our attention because this is something that was missing in the Indonesian history. We're going to Indonesian history after this one, but back then, government officials were not people of status. They were usually government positions or employees. These positions were held by people who couldn't make it in the business stance. So they were leftover people who couldn't compete in the market, so to speak. They went to the government. They became officials. They didn't make a lot of money. Okay, so that's something peculiar. And even some entrepreneurs who went into the government usually because of the draft, so it was obligated at one point to serve in the public offices. They didn't really like it, but some joined it as government officials. They didn't like it because the status as peddlers or middle class in the economy was much better than becoming public servants, we call it. That's the term of public servants, for example, okay? But let's compare it with today. Let's compare with today's. Anywhere in the world, managers of corporations, for example, we look up at the governments because they are the law. With the time evolving, and managers of corporations are different than the peddlers in the sense that they didn't actually take risks. They tried to, they could hide behind, committee decisions. So there was no personal decision. So very different game. Yeah. So unlike entrepreneurs back then who took everything by their own calculation. So risk becomes something that nobody wants to play in this new development. If they can avoid it, these government officials and managers of big corporations, they probably will run away from that one because it's difficult to take risks. Okay, and here's another thing that is probably true until today. We talk about security. Security has become a fetish, something that everybody seems to be obsessed. We need security. What if I finish later on employment or something like that? What will my family eat from? Okay. Anyway, it is true that security has always been a human aim or our objective in life, but
the tendency during the 20th century, which is today, is that we put the burden of our own selves to the society. So then there is a shifting in the values that rather than being responsible for your own person, your own family, now trying to shift the burdens to somebody else, to the society. Now there's a change in outlook or attitude. The young people nowadays entering the business arena, what do they want? They want security. Even the president director of firm, they want security when they get their pension. Okay, so this is a change of attitude, not only in Indonesia but also in the big country as America, from personal responsibility to collectivized security. If you don't know, we can find a reason. Why is it so? Maybe life became more difficult. Probably everything became expensive. Yes, maybe. Or maybe some money that you made was taken by somebody else in the form, like, for example, taxations. We don't know. Probably. Okay. Let's continue. It is difficult. It's not easy to have a talk like this where the shifting of attitude of values, where to spot it. Everybody is busy, I know, and time here. So, but there is this urgency to turn to government for assistance in almost everything. Many people say, oh, what can government do? Or government must do something about it. This is the attitude that we have now, right? Almost in every aspect of our life. So, why has it happened? We don't know exactly, but if we want to learn from history, it must be due to some ideas. Ideas have consequences. Probably some ideas have something to do with the socialistic or populistic ideas that pervaded the 20th century. Anyway, that's what happened. Actually, there is something that is not changed, and this is important, the human nature, our human nature. The fact that we are human is the same. One thing, and this is a source, something that we need to remember. Everybody has inner compulsion. For example, people in the 1900s were actually the same as people who live in the 21st century as today. Everybody has the compulsion to see or to satisfy our desires with the least effort. We do not want to exert more effort than necessary. That's true human nature from time to time, and I think it's not going to be changing, right? And something to do with the human nature. This impulse to economize is the reason why we created labor savings devices. Very good, positive, because we want to save time. Everything must be faster. But at the same time, that's also the reason why some people take the property of other people, because they do not want to. So see, this can be positive, can be negative. But then this one returns to human nature or human characters. Anyway, actually when we talked about that was a brief history of the Protestant ethic that made America great. A lot of writers wrote about it. Because of this one, the people were endowed with free will. Everybody believed we had the power to change, and we were responsible beings to ourselves, to other people surrounding us, and also to God. This was so-called Protestant ethics. But little by little, this ethic got changed by ideas. One of the things that I spotted is something to do with Freud. You must have heard about Sigmund Freud. Yeah? Sigmund Freud was a very important psychologist. Although very little of scientific records have been discovered or studied about his theory was very popular. In essence, one of the most important theories is that human being, society is to blame for all the problems that individuals have since the babies were born. So now they're beginning to feel neurotic about the things that happen in human fate. So babies are in the care of the society. Society is to blame for all this neuroticism, You probably disagree, but that was the thing that was very popular by then. And then along with this kind of social theory, there is another, the arising of the statism. Statism means the growth of government becoming big and big, and it becomes very important, more than important than individuals. And then this statism fits very nicely with Freudian concept, with the responsibility of the society to individuals. So here is another change in the social theory. Okay? So the welfare state is a state that would like to govern the lives of the individuals. Some people nowadays, some economists, they favor this one because they believe that's the right thing to do. But this is an idea that we need to look closely, maybe later on, not today. Okay, enough with the American history. Now I'm going to go back to Indonesian context. What about Indonesian context? The stories that we had just now about the peddlers happened when Indonesia did not exist yet. We didn't have it, right? When we came as a nation in the 1940s, the world was, the welfare state, the statism was prevalent everywhere in the world. The world, we can say, was practicing this idea of governing people. Okay, and then the story of Indonesia began exactly like that. For example, take the word of pemerintah. Is a militaristic color there. Yeah? And I tried to find out when the word pemerintah was first used. And my research discovered it was even before Indonesia existed, during the colonialization. This word was already used in newspapers. Pre-Indonesia, it was already used. And until now, we use the pemerintah as somebody who gives you orders. Okay, so that's the case with us. The status of the power and the individuals, in this case, entrepreneurs. Our focus is entrepreneurship, by the way. So, Prasmo, this is relevant. That's why I wanted Alvin asked me to join. Okay, the message is this. This is very important because, especially during the orientation, some new students, semester 1, came to me, and one of the questions they asked is that, what makes you happy to work here? What is it that you like about Prasetiya Mulya? And I was thinking very quickly, because I knew why I joined Prasmo, and it was that because this is one of the rarest schools which aim to create and promote entrepreneurship. We aspire to prepare people who would like to become entrepreneurs and also professionals on their way probably to joining the corporates, maybe before they accumulate experience, and to come back as entrepreneurs as such. So that's one of the reasons. But little do they know about what it means what does it mean to become an entrepreneur. Now let's enter this area, a little bit academic. What is entrepreneur, or what is entrepreneurship? Because these words are commonly used and sometimes not consistently. Entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial, yeah. I think Professor Ferlito will talk more about these things, okay? But it can be a mindset, it can be people who start startups, so a lot of definitions about entrepreneurship, okay? And more recently, again, I think Prof. Carmelo will tell you more about the tendency or the definition, academic definitions of entrepreneurship. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. But I would like to point out that actually it is the entrepreneurs who are the driving force of the market economy. And it is entrepreneurs who are at the front and the center actually of production and exchange. Okay, and entrepreneurship is a decisive action under uncertain conditions, like now and future, lies central of any market or any economy. It is the entrepreneurs who invest in capital necessary for production of growth, who organize productions into firms and industries, who compete and cooperate, make profits or suffer losses. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. We do understand that not everybody wants to be responsible for owning a company, for example, right? Because it can be very, very difficult to run a company, no matter small. You have to oversee everything, all aspects of the operations. Some of our students, some of you might want to learn in a particular area of expertise, like for example finance. So you really master that one, and that is what happens nowadays also. Anyway, when it comes to the legal and political environment, the evidence is very clear that countries, we're talking about conditions of making Indonesia big, right, or better, because that is also one of the missions of Prasetiya Mulya. Countries with strong property rights, protection, or well-functioning monetary system, minimal government intervention in the economy, these provide the best environment for entrepreneurship and economic growth. This is not a government that micromanages entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are far more superior than government officials. Okay, freedoms to fail. In an environment where freedoms to fail is allowed, no bailouts, no favors or subsidies for unsuccessful ventures, because that is the risk of becoming entrepreneurs. Yeah. Right. I'm going to skip this one to the most important one is this one, especially to face the global era. Basic knowledge about globalization is important. This one there is a correction. A deep theoretical knowledge of economics or international trade, I argue, is not really necessary. A deep one. But you have to have solid fundamentals of economics and also globalization, globalized country. Okay, and intuition and experience are typically more valuable. There are many things we cannot learn in colleges, in the seats here, but out there in the market. By the way, this was an old one. It should be the title of the virtue and ethic of entrepreneurship. And by virtue we mean the particular moral excellence, or the quality or power of thing to be excellent. That's a virtue. And ethic here is moral principles, as you know. Sorry about this one. It should be in the beginning. Okay. Anyway, here is the last one. I would like to point with the phenomenon of virtue merchants, virtue business people. Okay. In about every hotel chain, protect the environment. This is similar to salesperson of a car salesperson. They're promoting something to your interest, but probably it is more to their interest, their own interest. Okay, right. The point is this one. My point is that global causes are very good, of course, and sometimes we use it for our advertising. For example, you sell your products, many S2 students, they're trying to, in their value propositions, they try to embellish their business models with something like green environment, or saving the environment, or even saving the planet, and then justice for the minority or something like that. They try to put something that sells. They are selling virtues, the virtues. They're trying to make appeal or to appeal by selling these virtues. Well, nothing is wrong perhaps about it, but it's very funny because actually virtue is something that you do not advertise, in our opinion. That it is not an investment strategy. Why? Because this is the same point. Young people aspiration, I would like to save the world. You advertise yourself like that one, for example. I would like to reduce poverty, or I would like to save the world. This is a virtue campaign, okay? But how are you going to do that? That's the challenge of every entrepreneur's wannabe. But actually, real entrepreneurs, coming back from the history of entrepreneurship, engage no virtue signaling. They don't declare themselves as virtuous. They do not engage in rent seeking. By the way, here's a definition of rent seeking. So you are proposing business ideas without giving very good value to the society. Actually, that rent seeking for your own interest, maybe because of subsidies or getting some money from the government. That's rent seeking, not entrepreneurship. Okay? And anyway, the value in being an entrepreneur is actually to take risk, bounded risk, well-calculated risk. That's the essence of entrepreneurship. And so take risk, get rich. If you get rich, which is no guarantee, but if you make a lot of money, you can help people, spend your money generously on others. That's entrepreneurship. We move away from the abstract, the social engineering that try to bring you into the perils of society by living your responsibilities to the society. That is not entrepreneurship. We do business or create one because this one will help. And the bravery of taking risk, bounded risk, and that is the virtue of being an entrepreneur. Thank you very much. That's the end of my speech.
Ferlito.
Thank you, Pak Sukasah, for addressing this interesting topic. I believe we have now a good understanding on how entrepreneurship emerged and actually shaped the society in general. Now, moving on to our next speaker, Professor Carmelo Ferlito. He is a senior fellow at the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He'll be speaking to us on economics, entrepreneurships, and also the meaning of capital itself from a theoretical point of view and also from an applied perspective. Please welcome and give a round of applause for Professor Carmelo.
Sell your book.
Yeah.
Selamat pagi. Terima kasih banyak untuk Pak Alvin dan Pak Sukasah. So when we speak in English, I will speak in bahasa Indonesia. Today I will give you a presentation. University Prasetiya Mulya gave me the opportunity to deliver. I'm very actually honored and flattered to be here and to have the possibility to speak to you. It's really unexpected, and I have to really thank Pak Sukasah and Pak Alvin for this great opportunity. A little bit of self-promotion. Most of the things that I am going to tell you are the main contents of this small book, which is my latest book, Hermeneutics of Capital, which was published in New York last year. Here we have some copies, so if some of you want to purchase a copy, today is available with a 40% discount compared with the price that is normally on Amazon. And there is also actually a Kindle version for the one of you that are used to use the Kindle e-reader, the Amazon e-reader. You are more familiar than me with this kind of modern instruments. So the title of my presentation is Entrepreneurship and the Meaning of Capital. My speech will be divided in 3 parts. At the beginning, I will try to explain you the meaning of economics that stand behind the concepts that will come later. So it is important to clarify the way in which we intend economics. After clarify this, we will use this general framework to give a general definition of entrepreneurship, and actually Pak Sukasah already explained pretty well. And finally, we will see how entrepreneurship has to deal with capital. My presentation will be highly theoretical, I would say, so you might be not familiar with the kind of concepts that I'm going to use, but I will try to cut them down in a way that can be understood. Because if a speaker is not able to have his audience understanding what he's talking about, according to the different kind of audience, I think he's not a good speaker. Okay? But if you are not understanding, you are confused, please raise your hand, stop me, and I will be able to try to reshape my sentences in a way that will be more clear to you. Paham? So, okay, these are my affiliations, but in particular here you can find my email address and my academia page, where you can find my research, my papers, and if you are interested in developing further knowledge about what I talk today, you can always drop me an email. Later I have also my business card, so feel free to ask and to be in touch. Actually, I love after my talks to be in touch with the audience, to receive feedbacks, and eventually to help to develop further knowledge about the topic. So, what about economics? I think you already did the Econ 101. Ready?
Yes, taking.
So, most probably, you realize you studied that economics deals with the allocation of scarce resources for a certain number of ends, and you have to choose how to allocate your resources to reach your ends. Is it correct? Is what you studied? I'm not a big fan of this definition, okay? And I will try to show you how this definition can only a point of arrival of things that come before. So I strongly believe that economics has not to deal with things and objects simply. I believe that it's more appropriate to define economics as a science that deals with men, human beings, meanings and actions, right? You are all human beings? Yes. More or less Homo sapiens sapiens? Yeah? And you all do actions, right? Yes. And you all try to do these actions with a meaning, hopefully. Otherwise, I mean, you come here for a reason. Might be even the reason that you were obliged to come here. It was compulsory for you to come here, but this is already a reason, right? So you gave a meaning to the fact that you are here. And therefore, in a way, we can define, very generally speaking, economics as the science of human action. This was a concept mainly delivered by an Austrian economist called Ludwig von Mises, with a big book called Human Action, published in 1949. But human action is not enough as a definition. It is important to understand that human action needs to be understood and interpreted. Therefore, economics is also an hermeneutical science. Hermeneutical means that has to deal with the meanings, with the interpretation. So, as an economist, I come here, I observe that a certain number of students are here in this class, but I cannot limit my analysis to the fact that you are here. My next question is, you are here, why? Kenapa orang-orang datang di sini pagi ini? Why? And this is the focus of economics. Of course, as an economist, I can guess. I can look into myself because I'm a fellow human being with you. So I try to understand the reason of your action. Because, as I just mentioned, every action is a purposeful human action. You do things with a purpose. Without an idea, you don't get up from bed in the morning. You must have a reason. Right? You follow me? Yes. So, human actions are indeed objective facts, and they are answers to other objective facts that constitute the elements of reality. However, the way in which such answers are defined is totally subjective, the outcome of interpretation processes, which we can define as hermeneutical actions, interpretative actions. So it means that you are, in every action, in between two objective facts, okay? There is the class, today, there is this guest lecture. You might decide to come or not to come. The way in which you respond to the objective fact, there is the guest lecture, is totally subjective. Okay? Even two different people taking the same decisions, that is to be here today, they might take it for a different reason. Someone could be here just because it is obligatory. Someone could be here because he's really interested. Or some of your colleagues that didn't come, they might choose like that because they have to meet the girlfriend, or because they prefer to go jogging, or because they think that an Italian speaker is boring. So the same objective outcome could be the consequence of very different subjective interpretations. Is it clear? Okay, good. So reality is objective. This is a matter of fact. This is a table for everybody. We cannot call it spoon. Try to eat the soup with this. Right? But it is the reaction to it. The reaction to it is an objective action deriving from subjective interpretation. We will go more deep into this when we will talk about capital. So, the subjective hermeneutical processes constitute the necessary link between objective facts. Okay? First objective fact, you wake up in the morning. Second objective fact, you are here to listen to me. In between, there is your interpretation of the reality. After you wake up in the morning, you have a certain aim for your day, and therefore you elaborate and you take a decision. And the final decision is that you are here for whatever reason. Right? So, where it stands the big weakness of modern day economics? The economics that you studied in Econ 101. Lagi, selamat datang. The big weakness in the definition that I mentioned to you before is that there is a focus on economizing and maximizing functions. So economizing is the fact that you try to allocate certain resources for certain ends, right? But the interesting things about economics is that before economizing, we must choose our ends and select our means. So if we take out this earlier process, basically we are cutting out the most interesting part of economics. That is how people actually choose. And that means to take into account something very very abstract, but at the same time very real, which is expectations, tastes, preferences. You cannot take expectations, tastes, and preferences simply as data. Data is a Latin word actually, so it's very familiar in my language, which comes from datum, that means given. So you understand that when you talk about data, you are talking about something that is already there, and you just have to apply this data to the reality. But if you look at your own personal experience, you realize that nothing is already given in your daily routine, right? Because you might come here and you find a lady or a boy that you were not knowing and you fall in love. And this is completely reshaping your expectations for the day, right? So, the big problem with standard economics is that with the fictional device of Homo economicus, the man is reduced to a reactor, like a robot, input, action, output, but in a way which is not creative. So all men with the fiction of the Homo economicus are exactly the same. They will react toward the same data in the same way, because they are perfectly rational, they have perfect knowledge, etc., etc. But look at yourself. Are you like that? All the ladies in this room like the same kind of man? I hope no, otherwise there would be no competition among the men. No? You all have different tastes. So the way in which you react in front of the same young guy at the university is different. Some of you will fall in love, some others will dislike him, right? So you are not Homo economicus, you are something different. You are Homo agents. You do action. And Homo agents has an earlier task, which is to identify which ends to strive for and which means are available. So how are ends and means actually defined? And here we have to stress again the importance of expectations. Individual action takes place in a context which generates, by hermeneutical processes, expectations about the future. It is according to such expectations that human minds define their set of ends and corresponding means, thought to be adequate to achieve ends. So, the task of economics is primarily to study how these hermeneutical processes actually happen. That means when you wake up in the morning, the direction that you are giving to your day, how it is defined. You are not reacting all in the same way. You are not robots. You have active minds that work in different ways because you have different kind of information stuck in your mind. And this is the most fascinating part of studying economics. This is the definition, therefore, that I give about human action. Human action consists of actual implementation of plans, the utilization of means to reach goals defined by expectations generated by interpretative processes, in turn sprouting from the impact between human beings and surrounding reality. When you impact with reality, you interpret reality and therefore generate expectation in yourself, and according to that you set up your plans, your ends, you choose your means, and you implement a plan that is the combination of means in order to achieve your ends. Sure? Yes. Later there will be a test, yeah? And okay, I cannot stop for too long on this, but when we conceive economics in the way as we just described, we must also introduce a very specific concept of time. Some economists contrapose Newtonian time against real time. just to explain it in a very simple way. When you study all the system of curves, okay, on the Cartesian plan in economics, you have time 0, time 1, time 2, time 3, right? And all the historical series, correct? But between time 1 and time 2 and time 3, nothing actually happened. Instead, if we look at what time actually is, it is a great deliverer of information. So as I mentioned before, you wake up in the morning, your idea is to go to university because you have to get graduated and therefore you have to come to listen to the lectures. But then, going to the bus stop, you meet a beautiful lady and you think, maybe today I might skip lecture and try to invite this lady for a coffee and see if I can get into a relationship with her. What actually happened? It happened that because of the time flow, your content of information changed, and therefore you revise your plan. You change your expectation. Before, you were setting on top the idea to go to the lecture for getting graduated. But then, a novelty element entered your daily reality, which is the beautiful lady, and this novelty entered because the time flow, and therefore you revise your plan. You go out with the lady for coffee. Then it might be that the lady say no, and then you come back to the lecture, so you revise again your plan. Or it might be that the lady say yes, and then you go for a coffee actually. So you can see how the time flow is a constant deliverer of novelty. And therefore you must continuously engage yourself into interpretative processes and revise your plan. Of course, you don't do this with a paper sheet and a pen. You do this unconsciously, but you are actually doing that. Think about your daily routine. You are constantly engaged in interpreting reality and revising your action because novelty enters your reality brought in by the time flow. Right? Okay? And therefore, how all these matters, how all these has to deal with entrepreneurship. What we discussed so far, I define it as human action, right? And in the realm of human action, therefore, we have seen the choice of means and ends, the setting up of plan and its implementation, the information transmission, the change of information, the central role of expectation, and the idea that our knowledge is always imperfect, in the sense that it's always changing, right? This is what we have defined so far. But when we look at the implementation of plans, we can see that some plans, among others, are smarter or quicker than others in identifying unexploited profit opportunities, which means that they have the ability to see, in example, where a good can be sold at a price higher than that for which it can be bought. Therefore, some of the human actions, okay, characterize themselves for their ability to exploit previously unnoticed profit opportunities. And this is the definition of entrepreneurship brought in by an economist still living, still alive, called Israel Kirzner, now retired, but before teaching at the University of New York University. Okay, so we have a broad set of actions that we call human actions, and inside it we have a smaller subset, which is called what I call Kirznerian entrepreneurship, or as it defined, alertness to profit opportunities. But another economist which I like very much, which is called Joseph Schumpeter, introduced an even narrower subset of actions. If we look at the consequences that this action brings into the scenario. For Schumpeter, entrepreneurship has to deal with innovation. So while for Kirchner, entrepreneurship is each kind of alertness to previously unnoticed profit opportunities, for Schumpeter, there are only innovations can actually be brought into the category of entrepreneurship. And Schumpeter defined innovation as 5 possibilities: the introduction of new goods, the introduction of a new method of production, the opening of a new market, the conquest of a new source of supply of raw materials, or the carrying out of a new organization in the industry, like a monopoly. These are all things that you can find if you are going to read Schumpeter, which was a very brilliant economist and writer. To read Schumpeter is like to read a novel. But okay, I don't go too much into this because Sukasah already went deep into entrepreneurship. What I want to stress is that once we have a definition of human action as the one that we deliver at the beginning of this lecture, then we can introduce entrepreneurship as a special kind of human action. And this is a personal synthesis actually that I developed. Usually Kirchner, Schumpeter, and the Mises human action are brought in as 3 different categories, sometimes even in conflict. What I try to do instead is to define them as the part of the same theoretical framework, okay, where in the Misesian category of human action, we include all the human actions. Then, among these actions, we identify specific actions that are able to bring in profit opportunities, exploit profit opportunities, and this is the definition of the Kirchnerian alertness. And a smaller group are the actions that bring in a revolution into the way to do things. Think about internet, think about electricity, think about the train 150 years ago. This kind of big innovations that change the way in which we do things every day, but they are still part of the general category of human action. But their consequences are so radical that we can define them as innovations. But not all entrepreneurial activities are actually innovative. Okay? So while all entrepreneurial activities are part of human actions, only a small group of entrepreneurial activity has revolutionary consequences in the economic system, and we call them innovations. This subdivision is clear? Yes, good. Therefore, we can move to the main topic actually of my talk, which is capital. When you listen about entrepreneurship, you always have an idea that to be entrepreneurs you need capital, right? Right? You cannot, but when you have this in mind, what do you think actually about capital? A lot of money. Something else? Ideas is very important. You can have a lot of money, but if you don't know how to spend them, this money remain lazy, idle, so they don't bring you any added value. This is very important, the combination of money and ideas. Apalagi? Will, of course. If we don't have the will to put our money or our ideas into a production process, nothing happened, right? And this is very Schumpeterian. For Schumpeter, the entrepreneur was something like the Nietzsche Superman. So someone with a very strong will, the desire of power. Network is important in the sense that if we produce something but we don't sell it, not much that we can do. In certain companies, they say to the R&D people that you have to kiss the feet of the salespeople because you can develop the most beautiful product, but if you are not able to sell it, there is not much that you can do with that beautiful product, right? So we have the network, the money, the ideas, the will. All very good things. But I will try to explain you, and the final definition will be that in the end, the capital is the outcome of a mental process. Probably the lady would be go against me because say, yeah, I cannot generate money with, as a mental process, no? It would be too easy if we could just think money like like a god, no? But it's not totally true. I will give you a very broad definition of capital. So, in order to achieve ends that are defined by expectations, we need to implement plans. We already seen this. But such plans imply the use of particular combinations of heterogeneous goods. And here you can see that all the things that you said are actually true. Combination of things, you mentioned different things, money, will, network, ideas, but these things are heterogeneous. So money can be actually counted, 1 million rupees, 2 million rupees, and etc. But how can we measure ideas? How can we measure the will? How can we measure the network? So you understand that all the goods that you are going to combine together in order to achieve your ends have an heterogeneous nature. They are different in kind. And therefore, any measurement of capital might be very complicated. But pay attention also to another thing, that not all things are actually good. When we define the central rule of expectations, we realize that the thing needs to be in conscious causal connection with the need satisfaction. If you meet the girl at the bus stop, okay, and you want to offer her a coffee, it means that consciously you think that the coffee will help you to achieve this end. That means coffee will help you to conquer this girl, in a way. And you must consciously recognize this connection, this link. Otherwise, you don't go for coffee, you will do something else. So you go for coffee because you consciously recognize the link between coffee and the possibility to conquer the girl. To be better, maybe Gucci bag, yeah, than a coffee, or a Valentino, or something like that. Huh? So these causal connections need to be known by the agent. But this consciousness needs to be put at the test with reality. Okay? If you go to the coffee shop with a lady and you find out that she's allergic to coffee, then your idea was not too smart, right? So you might be conscious of a certain link, but you might be also wrong about that link. So the recognition of a link between a certain thing, a certain good, and the achievement of a certain end is not a guarantee that the link actually exists. If you meet an Italian girl and you bring her for coffee in Coffee Excelso, where yesterday I got a soup instead of a coffee, you will disappoint her and she will not date you a second time. Because she wants the real coffee, she doesn't want the broth, the black broth, right? So, in order for a thing to become a good, it is necessary primarily that it is thought as suitable for an insatisfaction. And afterward, such suitability needs to be tested in the reality. And the initial idea, so the outcome of the initial hermeneutical process, can find confirmation or denial. Subjective processes need always to find confirmation in the factual reality, and this kind of testing process are never at rest. Every time you try to use something in order to achieve an end, you are actually doing a reality test. Of course, there are things that are given for granted, like a spoon is adequate to eat a soup, right? So you are not thinking every time, might this spoon be suitable for eating the soup? You would be crazy if every day you would think this, right? Because you acquired already a certainty about the suitability for spoons to eat the soup, right? But in the millions of processes that are in your mind every moment, you are actually always testing this. Okay? Will this class help you to graduate yourself? Who knows? Maybe you will discover in 2 years or 3 years. So, things, goods. And among all the goods, which are capital goods? Goods are capital goods by the virtue of an economic function, not by virtue of physical feature. So capital is also a subjective outcome. So before we mention will, ideas, and etc. related with money, money is not always capital. If you don't combine money with ideas, or with will, or with network, you don't get anything. But above all, you need to implement this money to be convinced that combined with other things, they will bring you a certain outcome. Money in your safety box are not capital, are just money. Did you understand this? Is clear? So you need the consciousness that this money can be suitable for achieving some ends, but you need also to actively implement this money in combination with other things in order to achieve ends. And you must believe that this process will bring out a certain result. In this way, money becomes capital. So capital goods are goods that in a specific moment in time are thought to be suitable to generate a certain output when combined with other goods in a production process unfolding in time. It will be the unfolding of the production process which will confirm their suitability as capital goods. So if you combine certain money with certain ideas in order to produce certain things, in the moment in which you are thinking, okay, the suitability of this combination, money and ideas, these two things, money and ideas, becomes capital goods. But it's only at the end of the production process that you will know if you were right or not. When with the outcome of the production process, you will go into the market and go at the test of the market, the test of reality. But in the moment in which you are thinking, these are already capital goods, but they might lose this attitude at the test in reality, or because your content of information change. If you date the girls allergic to coffee, coffee, in the moment in which you implement your plan, is considered a capital good. But when you discover that the girl is allergic to coffee, then coffee loses the nature of capital good. Because if you are thinking that coffee will help you to conquer the girl, but in the end it will not, because of the allergy of the lady, then the feature of capital is lost. So it's not the objectivity of coffee that makes coffee a capital good, but it is its suitability in order to achieve my ends, to reach my plan, that make it a capital good. So coffee itself is nothing. Coffee becomes something when it is suitable to satisfy a certain need. And it is proof to be able to do so. Correct? Clear? A little complicated, unusual, but we are moving there. So in my book, actually, I introduced something that I claim to be quite original, or at least I haven't found it in other authors, which is the difference between potential capital goods and actual capital goods. Okay? This I think is one of the most original things that I brought in my theoretical elaboration. So potential capital goods are the goods that in a specific moment in time are thought to be suitable for generating a certain output when combined with other goods in a production process unfolding in time. While actual capital goods are the goods that in a specific moment, after being thought as suitable, are actually combined in these production processes unfolding in time. So, in the moment in which you are thinking that coffee is suitable for conquering the girl, coffee becomes a capital good, but as potential capital good. In the moment in which you actually buy the coffee for the lady, then it is an actual capital good. Because it might be for whatever reason that, in example, you cross the road and a car crashes against you, so there is something new happening, you are not able anymore to buy the coffee, so coffee remains at potential level as a capital good, but never become an actual capital good because you are dead. Just give you an extreme example to make things easy to be understood. Yeah? Take it as extreme, but I think it renders the idea. Okay? So it was a potential capital good, but Requies can't pace, it is not anymore a capital good. Okay? And this capital can be actually defined in physical way or as a value. So physically speaking, in any given moment, potential capital is the set of the potential capital goods, to make it short, and actual capitals is the actual set of goods. You have seen that so far I never introduced something like a measure, a value of capital, right? I always talk about goods, which are heterogeneous. So you have the coffee, you have the money, you have the time. Time is very precious capital good, okay? But how to combine everything in value? Can we actually measure capital? Can we? What do you think? How much is your capital? So one of the main points that I raised in my book following a German economist called Ludwig Lachmann is that capital cannot be measured. Can be a little bit a nihilistic conclusion, but because of the heterogeneous nature of capital goods, we cannot really measure capital objectively as it is done in the mainstream economics, as an aggregate. So you put together ideas, you put together money, you put together will, you put together whatever you want, and then they come out with a number. So I believe that any aggregative attempt to define capital would be totally meaningless. So you can, in some way, get a number, but the meaning, the power of this number to explain reality is basically zero. Okay? And therefore, I try to be consistent with my analysis, and I believe that the capital value is also subjective. Okay? It's not an objective measure, but is as the definition of capital is subjective, is related with subjective ends. Also, the measure of it, the quantitative measure, is subjective. And I developed this kind of formulas, which, honestly speaking, I developed only because mainstream economists like formulas. I personally don't like formulas, but nowadays, if you don't speak with formulas, nobody listens to you. So, in order to try to be engaged in debate with other economists, I surrender to the power of formulas, and I define it in this way potential capital value and actual capital value. So potential capital value, we have to take the potential capital, the expected output meant to be obtained with that capital, the expected value, market price, at the realization moment, means when you sell your output, the time at which the potential capital is bought, the time at which the expected output is expected to be sold, the lag of time between the two moments, an interest rate. Now I cannot explain what I mean by interest rate, but take it as it is. And therefore, the value of the potential capital is the value of the expected output discounted with an interest rate by the time lag between the moment at which capital is bought and the moment in which the expected output is expected to be sold. You didn't understand, for sure. I know, formulas always introduce some difficulty, but to take it easy, in the moment in which we implement goods into a production process, we want to obtain an output, right? Okay. And there will be a time lag between the moment in which we have the production process and the moment in which we have the expected output, right? Good. And in the moment in which we are doing the production process, we don't know the actual value of the output, right? We still don't know at which price we will sell our product, right? But we have certain expectations. We hope to sell our product at a certain price that will allow us to make a profit, right? Therefore, in order to calculate the value of potential capital that is the same with actual capital, we take the expected value of our output, that means the price that we expect to get from our product, expected. So also this is subjective. It's not yet objective. Expected, okay. And we discounted here, back in time, using the interest rate and using the time between the moment in which we are now and the moment in which we expect to sell. 1 year, 2 years, a month, 3 months, etc., etc. Is more clear? So you can see. Someone say anything?
Yeah, I said clear.
Okay. So you see that even this evaluation is totally subjective, because we enter with an expected value of the output that we don't have yet. And we do an estimation of the time between the selling moment and the moment in which we are now. And therefore, the value of potential capital is different according to the different moment in which we are thinking about capital. Because maybe it's a production process that takes 1 year. Maybe in 2 months we have different expectations about the selling price. Okay? And the time is also changing. Therefore, in any different moment, theoretically, the value of capital is different. This is the psychedelic nature of my theory. For actual capital is exactly the same, so I'm not going too much in details to avoid to make you confused. Only the different moments are taken into account. I will conclude with capital structure and production function. Did you already study the production function in microeconomics? Anyway, you will find out that production function is that formula there. That means that the output that you obtain for your production is a function of K intended generally as a capital and L intended as labor. This is the most famous production function that you find in all manual textbooks of the economics. Okay, this was defined by Robert Solow, I believe. But I contend that this production function is not able to grasp the real nature, the heterogeneous nature of capital. And in the way in which we define capital, labor is just a subset of capital. No? Because if capital goods are all the goods that we combine together in a production process in time in order to get an output, labor is also part of capital. It is not written anywhere that capital needs to be physical. As your colleague said, capital can be an idea. An idea is typical of human beings, not of objects. So it's part of labor, very highly qualified labor, but it's into capital as well. Okay, so the conflict between capital and labor, in my view, for a production function doesn't exist. Labor is just a subset of capital. So how I define the production function? This is the new one. I don't know if maybe in 50 years you will find this formula on the textbooks, hopefully, but I don't think so. I don't have this kind of pretension. So let's see. So OX is the output at the end of the production process. So our final outcome. And I define it as a function of ON, that means the desired output, because it's not given that the actual output is the same. I mean, this is a different moment in time. So OX is the output at the moment X, that is at the end of the production process. ON is the desired output at the moment N. There is a mistake, it's not X, it's N. AC is the actual capital, and TF is the time flow. So, in my view, the final output is a function of what you wanted to get, so your expectations. You want to produce an iPhone, okay? So, at a certain moment, you have an expectation to produce an iPhone. AC, actual capital, are the goods that are used in order to produce the final output, okay, the capital goods, and time flow. There is no production process without time flow. You cannot take out time from the production function. Therefore, the output is a function of three things: the actual capital goods, the expectations, what you wanted to get, and time. This is the production functions that I propose to the academic world. One thing, of course, can we define in this way a capital structure constant over time in the economic process? I believe no, because production processes and expectations can always change, and therefore the capital structure of a certain economic system is also always changing, and therefore any attempt to define a stable capital structure of an economic system is impossible. I believe it is more like a blob. It's continuously changing because time is flowing, time is bringing in new information, and new information is bringing new expectations. New expectations are forcing you to revise your plan. Therefore, I follow the so-called kaleidoscope metaphor. You know the kaleidoscope? When you watch something, that the moment in which you grasp that shape, the shape is already gone. As I like the cover of my book. And therefore, it's the same for capital structure. In the moment in which you are able to grasp it, it is already changing. Because the production process is in continuous evolution. To conclude, I hope that the main idea that you bring home is that economics relies on expectations and the study of the working of subjective minds. Entrepreneurship is a special character of human action, of the processes of subjective minds, and capital goods is what the mind, capital is what your mind think to be important to achieve your ends. And therefore, whatever happens in reality, all the objective things, the objective processes that you observe into reality are, at the end, in a nutshell, the outcome of your mental processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Carmelo, for the informative and enriching topic. What I realized that Professor Carmelo actually uses more to heterodox approach in explaining economics and entrepreneurships and also the meaning of capital itself. Now, we come to Q&A session. So for those who have questions, please raise your hands and introduce yourself first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sukasah and Mr. Carmelo. Should I ask in English or Indonesian?
English, for me, English better.
Okay. That means I have to take risks. Okay, thank you. As you know, many of us here, want to be an entrepreneur. But we see there are so many choices, too many choices today. We have agriculture, electronic, we have food business, maybe gadget, maybe whatever infrastructure. Too many choices make us delay our decision, right? And that means lowering our potential of the capital because we delay the time. because we have too many choices. We call it paranoid and too many choices. I got the idea, but I don't know what to apply to which areas. So I would like to ask both of you on your opinion. Which industries we should search that ideas? Maybe I'm wrong. Which industries are promising nowadays? Maybe through your different answers. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Suitomo and I'm from Executive Learning Institute. It's just 2 floors downstairs from here. That's my office.
Thank you. Well, I believe that first of all, this is the task of an economist is not to be a business consultant. Economists that adventure into practical activities are usually not so successful. Lord Keynes, that is the most celebrated economist of the past century, lost a big fortune because he didn't see the 1929 crisis coming. So he was considered the prophet of economics last century. So I think that as an economist, we should not give advice on which business to entail. And I believe that this is part of a subjective interpretation. It means that there are also subjective preferences, industries that some person might like more or like less, experience and knowledge that persons might have, or even constraint from reality. I know one of my close friends is in Italy as a company of pest control, okay, killing the rats, killing the insects, etc. Why does he have this company? Because when he was younger, he wanted to become a philosophy professor. But then when he was having his academic career, his father passed away, leaving the company, and he was thinking that it might have been a much more profitable solution for him and his family to take over the company of the father instead of going ahead and teaching philosophy, which is not a very remunerative task in Italy. Therefore, he continued a business in pest control, not because of a very highly theoretical choice or a very big business plan, but just because it was what he had in hand at the moment. I believe personally, in general, looking at the Indonesian scenario, that profit opportunities are really everywhere. So it's a matter to apply your skills, even in one thing that, in example, young students don't consider are the conservative industries. Agriculture. Agriculture is no more or not only all the people collecting rice into the paddy fields. I mean, I deal quite a lot with agriculture, and agriculture is industrial today, and there are in Indonesia, think about the poultry industry, groups like Charmpopkan or Jaffa, which have a turnover of billions and billions every year. But because also often of the background in education, young people think that money comes only from financial things, which is not true. People in Indonesia are still making a lot of money with big agriculture. So why not?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Prasetiya, for the questions. I also shared my colleagues' opinions about it. Actually, I'd like to rephrase the questions of too many choices as opposed to the availability of capital, as if they are competing, and then you conclude that the value of the capital then would somehow be affected by the indecisiveness. But I would tend to see it differently. I do not claim to know the answer of which industries to invest.
I also believe, I do believe that we can invest in any as long as problems exist, because that is why entrepreneurs exist, to solve the problems. Yeah, but we can theorize, we can think about the trends, the future, if we want a certain degree of profit-making opportunities, of course. Yeah, and but there is no problem with too many choices as opposed to the value of the capital. I think it's the general problem of human being faced with too many opportunities or too many plans. I think that's my opinion. Yeah, we can always find opportunities in things that do not exist, and then mysteriously enough, we can also plow opportunities to things that people forget, like agriculture, as in your case of example. So there are too many opportunities for entrepreneurs, especially the little ones. I do not think it's a problem, because that's the risk. The challenge and also the attraction of being entrepreneurs. Thank you. That will be my answer.
Thank you, Professor Carmelo and Pak Sukasah, for the answer. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Iqbal from student Liberty, and my question is: I studied economics a few years ago, so my question is: what is the objective of the function of the production function? Because what we usually learn is that output is the function of the capital and labor, and there are more advanced models, advanced monetization technologies, and so on. But what's the? I still do not get the objective of the when you put the expectations on the model of the production function. The mainstream model or neoclassical model. We can measure the output, we can maximize the output with concern of the cost, and we can get the maximum output based on the capital and labor that we can use. Thank you very much.
Again, I think that there is a big problem put into the neoclassical production function. Not only the fact that labor and capital are seen as alternative. So you use more, in a way the concept is you use more machine and less human beings, or vice versa. But actually, in example, how do you evaluate the contribution of human beings to production? This is something that is a problem that dates back since Adam Smith, because when they tried to find an objective measure of value, and they tried to identify the measure of value in the quantity of labor. And it might be simple to look at the quantity of hours, but we all realize that not all the hours are the same. Sometimes, I mean, I work also as a general manager for a multinational, for the local branch of a multinational. Sometimes I work less hours than my employees, but I would say that the general outcome of the hours I work is different from the outcome of the hours that are implied, in example, in the production of machines from a blue collar. So how do you actually mix together all these kind of heterogeneous things? So as you mentioned, we must ask ourselves, what do we do with the production function? No? And it is clear, of course, into companies there is the possibility to study which is the best way to implement things in order to maximize the output that we get. But this can be, I believe, observed first only at the micro level, at a single company level, and we have to have the humbleness to admit that the model that we develop not necessarily work. So there might be sometimes I observe in some companies the idea that if an employee leaves, okay, you just leave. I will replace you with someone else, and nothing will change. But this means that you don't realize that behind an employee there is a history. If you if your salesperson leave you and go to work for your competitor, it's not simply a piece on a chessboard that is moving. It's a network. You mentioned the network before. A network of contacts that is living. So to evaluate the contribution of that kind of person, it cannot simply be replaced by someone else. One human being work a certain number of hours against another human being working the same number of hours. Because inside the human being there is a history, a network of things. And therefore that's why I prefer to use a production function in a very general way. Not really for predictions, but to define a concept. That means our output is in a way, in a mysterious way, if you want, in a non-deterministic way, related with our expectations, our capital, and the time flow. This is mostly to define a concept rather than making forecast or models. Want to add something?
Is that okay? All right, thank you for your question. Next, Albert.
Pass the microphone.
Can you pass?
My name is Alvin. I'm a graduate student in Prasetiya in business economics major. I want to ask, from what I catch, you normally think that data is reliable enough to use as a basis in decision making. So what alternative methods should we use to decide to make our decision?
That's a good question.
Maybe I didn't explain myself properly, but of course data are very important. The issue is how you interpret data. Data need to be interpreted, and data are not the full pictures. That was my message. To base your decisions only on historical series be very limiting, because the reality doesn't work in a deterministic way. In fact, when you study econometrics, and you find the line that better approximate a certain data distribution, indeed that line is approximating, that the next point of the distribution will never be on that line. Will be maybe somewhere around, but never on the line. If we expect that because we define a line, y is function of x, that in the next year, because of a certain distribution of the GDP in the past 10 years, then I can foresee how GDP will be next year, this is foolish. I can expect that GDP more or less will be in a certain range, but I have always to be open to unexpected things. What about an earthquake, in example, or a tsunami? Or what about a global crisis? Or again, if I look at the property market, for example in Indonesia or in Malaysia, where I live, I expect a crisis. And here in Indonesia, example, prices already started to go down. And I based this, of course, on the evolution of the property market in the past years, in the past decade. But I cannot with precision tell you when the bubble will actually burst and how deep will be the crisis in terms of duration, because this will depend also on policies, on the interpretation, the mind interpretation, how people will take. People will be desperate or people will try to strive to get the situation getting better fast. So this is also something that will affect a potential recovery, how people perceive the crisis. Depression or fighting mood. So data are important, are very important, but data need to be taken for what they are. And we cannot ask data to be the base for fortune telling. Data are what they are. We have to manipulate them with care. That's why one thing that always strikes me, makes me laugh. If you look at about GDP forecast, every 3 months they are revised. Of course, because they are based on historical data, and historical data they never replicate themselves in a linear way. So the central bank, World Bank, IMF, all these people doing statistics, they always have to revise because data are always changing. Then I ask, what's the point to make these forecasts? Or the way in which we take this forecast must be also very flexible. I don't get desperate if they tell me that the GDP will go down. I want to look at how GDP is generated. More investment, more consumption, more public expenditure, and if public expenditure is financed by taxation or is financed by borrowing. Because the micro reality behind the macro aggregates is much more important. Macro aggregates, they tell me very little about the general health of an economic system. If I'm an economist, seriously, I must go and look behind the micro reality. That will give me really a hint about economics.
Just a quick addition. First, I would like to acknowledge that this is a very good question, very, very important question. And I do agree also with Professor Carmelo. One thing to take home from today's interaction is that, especially, I know that you are a first-year student here, so Melford. So the one thing, at least, we need to be very careful at interpreting data. And we learn later on in the next semester, you will learn econometrics and modeling and mathematics, statistical analysis. So one thing that we need to treat the data, I think, can be with more caution, especially if those of you who are from the background in statistics, there are always caveat emptors, exceptions that we need to pay attention to. It would be a gross mistake to take it as a necessary things that will happen out of it. So I'll repeat, the good thing is we can be more careful with the interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukasah and Dr. Carmelo. Is there any question? Two more, right?
Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm also a first-year student, just like Melbourne. You implied that earlier, classical economics is obsolete, and mostly that calculations are impossible to predict future outcomes and in that event. So, what is the future of economics in general? If it were to evolve this way, where everything is measurable and not measurable at the same time, I mean, its value keeps on changing, then how should we, what's going to look like in the future? Thanks.
Okay, we must distinguish. Calculation is very important. Which calculation and who calculates for who. So calculation is a very important feature of entrepreneurs. Without calculation, they cannot understand if they are losing money or making a profit. So they look at what they spend in order to achieve something, and they look at what they are getting, and if the difference is positive, okay, go ahead. If the difference is negative, there is something wrong and they need to reshape things. So calculation intended like this as using price for economic accountability, that is crucial. If we look at the profession of economists instead, I would say that calculus is a device. So I'm not denying again the importance of modeling and calculus, but if economics is only modeling and calculus, the possibility to interpret reality is very limited. In fact, if you look at the economic crisis that started in Europe in 2007, mainstream economics, neoclassical economics, not classical, neoclassical economics, was not able to see it coming. Keynesian economics was not able to see it coming. So this must inquire us, why is like that? Why do we need economists if they are so good in doing modeling, but about the important things of reality they cannot do anything? I'm very disappointed in reading economics journals. What do you read in economics journal? They take a data series, they interpolate it, they get the result and say, okay, it is significant, it's not significant. Like the consumption or the number of blonde people in a country is actually affecting the GDP or not. I'm not. Is the question having a meaning itself or not? So I believe that the problem with economists today is their equipment. They focus only on one set of equipment, which is calculus. But in order to understand the complexity of reality, you need much more. You need to know history. How can you understand the Indonesian economy if you don't know Indonesian history? So you are somewhere sitting in Washington, an FMI, and an IMF or World Bank, and telling Indonesia what they have to do, but you don't know anything about Dutch colonization or even what was there before the Dutch came. I'm quite a history reader. I like to study, so I went to read what was going on in the Indonesian economy before the Dutch came here. Because Indonesia didn't start with Dutch and with the cinnamon and pepper trade. There was something here before. So how can you understand Indonesia today if you don't know Indonesian history? In a non-deterministic way, I mean as a global picture. How can you understand economy without knowing anything about politics? Which are they involved? Or about sociology? Or even about philosophy? If I would be a teacher of economics, I would tell to my students, first you study Plato and Aristotle, then later you can study calculus. Calculus is just a device. But how can you understand the reality if you don't know anything about Plato and Aristotle, which define all the mind categories that we are using in our daily life today? So I would say that the equipment of an economist must be much more complex than what they are now. In this sense, we can have economists able to tell something meaningful for reality. Otherwise, we have economists close them in their laboratory doing their simulations that have no impact and no connection with reality. Universities are happy to pay their salaries as far as they are private universities and when it's not with my taxpayer money, it's okay. But when they are doing that in public university with my money, then I get a little bit concerned. Sukasah, you want to add something?
Yeah, just a little bit. Thank you. I would like to focus or narrow down the realm of your question to strictly to entrepreneurship. Okay, so in which calculation is important and key, actually the basis of entrepreneurial decisions starting from there, and the outcome of which, whether or not it turns out as a profit or loss, is there. So there is no denial of the importance of some figures, the knowledge of finance and economics. Yeah, it's just that we need caution as far as we apply it. For example, are we going to deal with our own business? I mean, our own knowledge, or are we going to use it to define the whole people? It might not apply for other people. That's what I mean. Thank you.
Another question from
the
editor.
Last question, because it's almost time to end.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Syahdan and I'm the first year of Prasetiya Mulya. University. And my question is, we knew that reality-wise, these functions and models will be very helpful within the entrepreneur's cycle. And say, for example, the output of a business, turns out there's something wrong with it. There's something, maybe the sales are not increasing, or it's just the society doesn't like the product in a general point of view. Then it means that there's something wrong with the input or the collections and combinations of the capitals. And we know that in business life, if we made a mistake, we test the model to reality, we cannot keep testing it because we have limited resources.
Exactly.
And so within your point of view, how is the best and most effective way in order to foresee the problems and how we can prevent it maybe from the, aside from the calculations? Thank you.
Okay. Let me first answer. Thank you. Let me try to answer this first now. Yeah, I think this is exactly where the I attended an econometrics training a few months ago here at Prasetiya Mulya. We had some very good training for several days, yeah. And then together with the researcher, the instructor, we devised a model of economics based on historical data already existed. And then we proved several times that we didn't even get to the reality. So meaning that modeling, there is a problem with modeling. We cannot really be sure about it. So, but still it's a useful device, internally especially for prediction purposes. As far as other devices that we as entrepreneurs should resort to, other than this modeling, we can use our intuition and also our experience, and also different devices like networking, and that is the first task actually that entrepreneurs should find out. Modeling is only one of the myriad of tools at their disposal to find the, let's say, decisions that might lead them nearer to the desired outputs. Thank you.
Just about one thing. If we talk strictly about entrepreneurs and business, and you think that business life is in a way related with modeling, then you are dead wrong. Business is impact with reality. So it will be reality that eventually suggests you in which business to go. And once you are in a company, and you, as you can, you just mentioned, maybe your sales are not adequate, your production is too costly, and etc. It's only going into reality that will give you the solution. Meeting your customers, meeting your competitors, going into the market. The real, when we talk about business, the only real big arbiter and judge is called market. So it's the market that is eventually telling you that you are doing something wrong, and you must go and see why it is wrong. But you don't understand what is wrong on a paper sheet or with a calculator. You understand only going into reality. It's there, your answer is there, it's not in the books, it's not in the papers. So business is very little about modeling, a lot about understanding human nature, about the impact of human nature with reality.
All right, thank you, Professor Carmelo and Sukasah. Now we've reached to the end of this session, and on behalf of Universitas Prasetiya Mulya, we would like to give a token of appreciation for presenters given by Professor Jusman Simanjuntak as our rector. Please give a round of applause.
Maybe one word.
First of all, thank you to the two speakers, or guests from Italy to Malaysia. I'm here not as an actor, but as an economist, and I was intrigued by the last two questions, and maybe three questions. There are frontiers in economics, not only one frontier. There are frontiers, and I am inclined now to study more the importance of information to economics. This is gaining momentum now. John Reader, a physicist, said fundamental stuffs of realities is information. But that's not the only frontier. Someone with the name of Rosenberg, Nathan Rosenberg, said that there is a big black hole in economics, and that black hole is said to be related to technology. And you cannot jump into a black hole and get out, but you still can study the horizon of the black hole, but never jump into the black hole. Of values, of long ago, economists said that value is attributable only to land. And then came the classic said only to labor. But maybe now is only to information. But I hope that this kind of discussions helps you to raise your imagination. Imagination is even more important than calculus. It's the imagination that enables you to roam around, to make use of diverse instruments, diverse techniques. And you may not be able to come to a very exact number, like the Planck constant. No. In economics, we are not able to do that. But at least you can have a good understanding of what is going on within a business and within an economy, in a region, as well as in the world at large. And on this note, I would like again to extend deepest appreciation to our guest from Italy. And thank you back. This is just a token from our university. If you go to Malaysia and have a look at this, you will remember us and maybe you will come again.
Yes.
To accept it in exchange. Sir, I would like to give a copy of my legacy.
Yes. What's Austria? Grazie. Thank you again, Raya. Oh, ini belum.
Oh, dapat juga saya.
Ya, Pak.
Terima kasih banyak, Pak.
Terima kasih banyak. And thank you for this.
Terima kasih banyak.
Bisa dipakai.
Sorry, I couldn't join the Not really. I have something to get. Thank you, Bayan.
Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak ya, Pak. Terima kasih, Pak.
All right. Thank you for coming to this lecture. And now we have a conversation. So, those who want to take pictures, please come forward. Thank you.
Should I? Oh yeah, we can.